All right, guys. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on sustainability in the aggregates industry. My name is Joseph Teahl. I'm a business developer with CDE specializing in the recycling space, and I'm honored to be here moderating this important conversation. Sustainability is no longer just a buzzword. It's a defining factor in how we operate, navigate regulations, and remain competitive in a rapidly evolving market. As an industry, we're facing critical questions. How do we balance sustainability with profitability? What innovations are driving real change? And what lessons can we take from leaders who are setting a standard? One of the most impactful innovations in sustainable material processing is CDE's advanced wash plant technology. CDE specializes in soil remediation and materials recovery, helping companies transfer contaminated and low-value feedstocks into clean, reusable materials. By using innovative washing systems, CDE enables operators to divert waste from landfills, comply with stringent environmental regulations, and create high-value products from what once was considered unusable. Whether it's removing contaminants from excavated soils or maximizing the recovery aggregates, CDE solutions are helping reshape how we think about waste and sustainability in our industry. To explore these topics further, we have an outstanding panel of experts with us today. And rather than me reading off some bios, I'd like each of them to briefly introduce themselves, share their background, explain how sustainability influences their work. First, I'd like to lead off with Guy.
Hello, everyone. Guy Woodford, editor of Aggregates Business, Europe, International, and now America with a new digital edition. Sustainability has become massive. It is the talking point. I travel globally. It's the talking point alongside digitalization, the telematics, how we can make money on that side. But how we can make money on sustainability, how we can recycle waste into aggregates, it's a key talking point. It has been more advanced in parts of Europe, like the Nordics, the Benelux, the UK. It's growing in other parts of Europe. It's also growing in Asia. I've seen a huge difference in China, for instance. Into China, they had a huge number of quarries. They've really got a third of what they had just a few years ago, but the quarries that remain are being turned into sort of super producers, 100 million tons quarries, with a huge emphasis on the green side, on extractive waste and processing that. And every part of their business is being turned into a more sustainable way of working. And if China are doing that, I've seen it in India. It's just going over the world. So what was quite niche just 5 years ago is now becoming center stage alongside the digital side of the business. So that's been huge. That's been absolutely huge. I mean, daily I get press releases, I get stories, I get contacts, do a lot on LinkedIn, lots of approaches on LinkedIn. What are you doing on sustainability here? What's this aspect? I've read about this manufacturer doing this. Can you tell me more? It is the talking point. Part of that is legislative driven, but part of it is also the customer wanting that, the end customer and the quarry operator seeing that they can, turn dirt into dollars in effect. And it's another revenue stream in addition to what they already get from their traditional business.
Hi, everyone. My name's Scott Brewster. I'm Managing Director of Brewster Brothers. We're a resource management business in Scotland, focusing on recycled aggregates from excavation waste. We operate 2 CD wash plants, servicing the 2 main cities in Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh. And we've come from a farming background, believe it or not. In the family business, we had a redundant quarry that was part of that farm estate. Operated that as a dump, effectively, for 10 years. As Guy was saying, just moved with the times, evolved, starting to extract that the value from that material, that waste stream, with mobile plants, so standard crusher and screening units, and proved that there was a market for it, returning a recycled aggregate product into the market, and that gives us the confidence to develop our first plant in 2018. And quickly evolved through the last 5 or 6 years and developed a second plant early last year.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hadi Rashidi. I'm the Director of Engineering and Technical Policy for the National Stone, Sand and Gravel Association. Our association is the trade association for the aggregates industry in the U.S. Our members produce 90% of the crushed stone and more than 70% of sand and gravel annually in the U.S. In my role, I work with federal agencies like Federal Highway, FAA at the US DOT, the US EPA, and state DOTs on the specification requirements for the products, for the aggregates. And the last 4 years during the Biden administration, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, there was significant incentives and emphasis on sustainability. There was, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there were programs focused on construction material and carbon labeling for specifically construction materials. Even though the aggregates was not one of the 4 materials listed, the construction materials listed in the IRA, namely steel, glass, asphalt, and concrete. But the main component of 2 of them, asphalt and concrete, is the aggregates. So even though aggregates industry by itself doesn't have a large carbon footprint, but we feel like we have a big handprint in making changes. So I've been involved representing the aggregate industry, trying with the federal agencies and state DOTs and finding opportunities for the aggregate industry to contribute to sustainability and in the fights against global warming. Now, as you all know, now we are in a different environment since January. The new administration has different priorities, and most of those programs focused on sustainability and fighting global warming that are currently under review. A lot of the funding to many of those programs have been frozen. Some programs have, because Inflation Reduction Act passed 3 years ago, so those programs that were newly created in the agencies, their staff were hired, unless they were transferred from other programs in their agencies, their staff were hired in less than 2 years, and they were considered probationary staff, and they were among the first round of firings at some of the agencies or letting the staff go. So we're still figuring out what's going to happen. We still think aggregate industry brings a lot of value to the sustainability. Sustainability is market driven, but we'll wait to see what happens.
Typically on our side of the pond, Europe and the UK might be considered ahead of the US when it comes to sustainability. What, Scott, what takeaways do you think that we could be learning from Europe and make money here? Why?
Yeah, it's definitely a more mature market in Europe and the UK in particular. There has been fiscal incentives back in the early days. I'd say it's probably a 20 to 25 year industry now, and the real pioneers in the early 2000s. Exploiting these fiscal instruments being the aggregates levy. So in the UK, we have a tax on quarried material to make recycled materials more competitive. And we also have landfill tax to try and deter waste going to landfill. So they've got these 2 key environmental taxes to kickstart the industry, and they've been maintained more or less at a similar rate. There's not been any. Well, actually, on the aggregate side, it's mainly been pretty constant in terms of, with respect to inflation. Landfill tax has been more aggressive, and landfill is, is an expensive thing now. So as I mentioned in my intro, we've really, I guess, evolved with the times, tried to exploit and I guess, make a business, entrepreneurialism, make a business out of that sort of regulatory and fiscal landscape. And yeah, as I say, the market's matured. The quality has matured as well, with the type of plants that CD supply. The technology's moved on. So yeah, the market has moved with us as well, and there's a strong market for recycled aggregates now. It's not as hard to sell as it once was.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's very noticeable in terms of a trend that the majors are really sort of investing heavily on the sustainable side. I mean, I've been reported a lot on big companies, the likes of the Holcim's, Heidelberg Materials. They're all going massive on sustainability. Some of it's like carbon capture, utilization and storage projects, massive projects, but also they're investing heavily. They see a lot of startups and smaller companies that specialized in recycled product, recycling waste, and either going to a joint venture with them or acquiring them outright, and if they're doing that, and obviously as majors doing that, it tends to trickle down, because if the majors doing that and they're investing heavily and they're producing a lot more recycled product, then they're reflecting the market, and then your small to medium start doing it, and it's a huge trickle down effect. And it's a fact, certainly in Europe, and I think increasingly in the US, it's harder to get permits for extending existing sites and for new sites. So it's using more of the pit, using more of what you've got on site, really sweating the asset, to use the term, which is, sums it up really. There's a lot more of that going on. And what the majors have certainly in Europe and other countries and globally, they're noticing that they can charge obviously a higher fee, because a lot more at times has gone into it, but the customers will pay for it because they're getting contracts off the back, because to get work you need to have increasingly a larger amount of recycled product. So the majors can sell it to the customers. They're getting the work because of they're using more recycled product. The whole sort of trickle effect, it's working. I mean, and from obviously getting contracts work from a price point of view, and from reducing emissions. So there's a lot of wins to be had here for a number of reasons. I mean, it's obviously the sustainability case is there, but it's also you can make really good money from this. And if you can marry those two together, you're onto an absolute winner. And that's certainly as I say, in parts of Europe, Nordics especially, Benelux, UK, I've seen increasingly Spain, Southern Europe are cottoning onto this and doing this. A lot is helped as well by industry associations really investing a lot into the sustainability agenda, really pushing it. Obviously, here in America, you've got NSSGA, you've got Aggregates UEPG in Europe, a big push on this side of the market, MPA in the UK, MIRO in Germany, FIDA in Spain. Everyone is cottoning onto this agenda, and for the right reasons. And it's exciting. It's an exciting market to be in. As I say, not just from the sustainability side, but from the quality of the final product and being able to, to monetize waste. There's so many wins.
I think what's really exciting in the States as well is, obviously it's earlier in its transition, but the fact that the market is driving that rather than fiscal and legislative landscape. So maybe Andrew can talk to that a bit, because I find that amazing, the potential that's there, and it's happening naturally without government incentives.
We have a different set of conditions, but getting the same result. For us, it's the market commission, just the fast jack, the quarries are at their end of our line. The land values are in certain settings, so putting the quarry to the work, so pushing forward. Disposal cost, partially to regulation, really driving the disposal cost. So we do have some, regulatory and government interference there. We're first and foremost, as we enter this, not new to you guys, but new to my region, is that we have to show everyone that it's a quality product. Until there's a buy-in on the aggregate side from what we're producing.
Sure. Great comments. Just wanted to add that great comment on the land value and when we look at the data production of the aggregates, USGS surveyed the industry and they publish data on the production quarterly and annually. And when you plot that, I believe the data is available from the 70s, early 70s. And when you plot that data, you'll see a drastic drop in production right around 2008 when the real estate market in the U.S. collapsed. And after that, you'll see the market pick up, but for many states, you'll see they're nowhere near that numbers. And at the national level, when you look at it, the production of the aggregate is right now is about where it was in the 80s. And when I think about this, that are we really, like, our economy is smaller? Are we spending less on developments, on infrastructure? No, we're doing more. Our economy, our population is higher, our economy is bigger, we're spending more, we're building more. But so why is the production of the new aggregate lower? The answer is we're recycling more. We are in a lot of states right now, 20% wrapping asphalt is pretty much standard. 15, 20%, and many states are talking about even going up to 40%. And that's the state's requirement. If you think about the commercial asphalt product for the driveways and low volume roads, it's even more. There are producers that are putting 100% wrap. So all that shows that there's demand. It's an evolving dynamic in the industry. There are more and more producers that are getting into recycling, and part of it is what Andrew mentioned, is just they're trying to be paying more attention to their reserve. They want to extend the life as much as they can, so they don't have to deal with permitting a new facility. And for those publicly traded companies, their reserve estimate is the value of the company. Yes, I agree with all the comments here, and regardless what the strategy and policy is, this is the trend.
We were using quarry aggregate for everything. And then it just dawned on somebody to start recycling. And it became a way for us to dispose of our factory for free, typically. And a recycler was taking in that factory for free and then it sell it for free. But then they started charging for that. And that was so they've been further and further down to this. And I would talk to factory recyclers about it. Like, how can you make me a wash product? Not a wash product, but I think it's street line. Washing is the best way to do that. But there are some other ways to screen. And they all just say, oh, it's not going to work.
I just wanted to comment as well, just about the logistics. You're saying quarries getting further away. Interesting, in Europe, and CEMEX, obviously a major, they've gone big on their urbanization solutions. So they're getting new sites closer to major towns and cities. So that obviously is going completely different to that. And they're doing it because obviously they want to reduce their carbon footprint. This is a good way of doing it. It's also good because you get it to a lot of the regeneration in the cities. They need the building products and major projects. So they're nearer to those projects. So they're getting permits. It's easier to get approvals for that because of the green credentials that they're offering. They're from the urbanization solutions portfolio. They're more green products. So there's wins there. You're also getting new recruits. It's easier to recruit the workforce because you are nearer a major city and town. That's a really good approach, I think, to this, and that encourages investment in the likes of CDE plant by having processing sites closer to major conurbations. It just makes sense. So that ties in very nicely with this whole agenda, and maybe that's something in the US we could see more of, where you have sites closer to where the end product is going to be used. That just makes sense to me, and maybe that's something we talked about, what the US can learn from Europe. That is a really interesting development, and I think that could be expanded on and introduced here.
Okay. I also think we're going to see a lot of things similar to what I've seen with the UK and even some facilities around here is in the United States, is that we're going to see recycling married up on the same property to a producer, so that you now bring everything into one location. You know, you see with the quarries now. A quarry has a concrete plant and an asphalt plant on it. So why shouldn't they watch recycling facilities use, for example,
Thank you for that, guys. We all touched on a little bit where, the sand, the high quality sand that comes out of your soil washing plant, it's nice to talk about it as a low carbon sand. So with that, some of these regulatory challenges, Hadi, I kind of want you to do your best to talk about EPDs and what that means to a recycling facility. So, let's start with Hadi and then Scott, because Scott has some real familiarity with EPDs. But, what role do these environmental product declarations play in kind of shaping the future of aggregates? And then, how is it helping you guys?
Sure. It ties very well with everything that was discussed here. It's when you look at an EPD, it's environmental product declaration. It shows different impacts on the environment, but the value that is right now everybody's interest is looking at the EPDs for is the global warming potential. And the global warming, and for when you think about it, for the aggregates itself, because the EPDs are cradle to gate, it's for the aggregates only for virgin aggregates, only extracting the material from the source and processing it, and that number is fairly low. However, when that material is transferred to the downstream in the supply chain to either an asphalt plant or a concrete plant, you have the transportation emissions, the global warming from transportation of the raw material to that facility. And when the asphalt and concrete producers are producing their EPDs include the global warming potential from production of the aggregate, global warming potential plus the global warming potential of the transportation, and global warming potential of their operation. So when they co-locate, when you bring the aggregate source to bring the asphalt or concrete closer to the source, or as was discussed, the market, you're reducing the total global warming potential. And when we were thinking about the role of the aggregates EPD, what impact it has, why we need that data, because when we did the life cycle assessment for the aggregate, we found out that our footprint is very, very small. It's compared to asphalt and concrete, it's maybe 2% of what total asphalt global warming potential of asphalt and concrete is, and that's why aggregates was not listed one of the 4 materials in the Inflation Reduction Act. However, when you transfer the heavy load of the aggregates, that is more 95% of the asphalt and more than 80% of the concrete to the plant, to the asphalt and concrete plant, those emissions are significant. So we thought the data from the EPDs can help showing that Accessing locally available material is important in the sustainability and reducing global warming potential. Reforming permitting to allow quarries to be able to get as close as possible to the marketplace. That will be the metropolitan areas, and that will make a huge difference. Co-locating with other operations that are downstream in the supply chain, that will make a big difference. And of course, one of the other thing is we also have to understand that we need to balance between recycling and production of the new aggregates. And this is, I think, will take years to do that. When we produce aggregate, we crush the aggregates. Rocks. It comes in different sizes. And you get the spectrum of gradation. And when you're recycling, in case of asphalt, for example, you mill the surface. You degrade the gradation. You bring it back to the facilities, all different chunks of different sizes. You can't use it in the mix because you don't know the gradation. So you have to crush it and fractionate it to different sizes. It further changes the gradation. So your recycled asphalt, for instance, it become very much equivalent to manufactured sand or smaller size. And when you use that material, replace the manufactured sand market, and the new virgin aggregate production still will have the manufactured sand. So manufactured sand turns into a byproduct. So recycling is great. We need to do it. But we also have to pay attention that the effects it has on the upstream, because we don't want to landfill the concrete or the asphalt, we may wind up landfilling the virgin aggregate that is now losing its market. So we need to also think about all of that, but definitely recycling at the source for the application that it works. Not necessarily for every application. I think one of the most dangerous one is the concrete. There's a lot of value into it. But because I'm a technical person, concrete, the chemistry is very complicated. And if you have a source that had an issue, let's say ASR issues, and it cracked, and you take it to a recycling facility and you crush it, and somehow it winds up in new concrete, that concrete will crack again. So you have to do it the right way. We need to be careful how we do it. There are low risk applications and there are high risk applications, but there's a lot of value into it. And that's why every agency that we work with, a lot of DOTs, they're looking into it. They're trying to accommodate it as much as they can, and industry is supporting it. But we need to do it. There's a lot more research that needs to be done, and not only research, figuring out how to do it in practice, that we take all the benefits and minimize the risk.
Our journey with EPDs in particular started with demand from the customer. So when we used to get posed the question, what is the difference between, in terms of carbon saving, between your products and a virgin product, we heavily relied on just generic government indices in the past. But I think with the advent of greenwashing, there's a lot more scrutiny out there, a lot more skepticism from the market. So we were pushed further on that, and it was like, no, what is the actual difference of your process? And the only way to get to the bottom of that is to do a life cycle assessment. So we started on that journey. We had it verified by BRE, which I think is the equivalent of LEED in the US. I had it verified by them and had a published EPD as a result. And because of where the waste threshold, the end of waste threshold is in our process, in Scotland, it's at the gate. So when the material leaves our site is when it becomes end of waste, it becomes a product. So all our processing emissions are actually attributed to treating the waste. So it's those emissions are effectively compared to what the carbon emissions would be if you took it to landfill. So effectively, we have a carbon-free product, X works, from the gate. And then obviously, Sky was alluding to, if you're closer to the market, then you should be winning on transport emissions as well.
And cost.
So yeah, that's our journey with EPDs. It's really been demanded from the market ultimately. And we see it more and more now, especially in public tenders, that it's sort of a prerequisite almost. You don't get past the first round of the tender unless you have one for your products. So we see ourselves hopefully being ahead of the curve, because I think we believe we're the only recycled aggregates producer in the UK to have EPDs for all their products. There are virgin producers that have EPDs for their products, but specifically on recycled aggregates, we're the only one. So I can see that demand only increasing in the future. And yeah, hopefully we're ahead of the curve in that respect.
And I just wanted to add, based on the numbers that we got in the US for the life cycle assessment that we did, if you haul the virgin aggregate for more than 21 miles, the global warming potential from transportation of the material exceeds its production. So basically, your client, if you're a producer and your client trying to identify the ideal source for their product, because they have to deliver or compete based on their carbon, their EPDs, they have to go with the source that is closer to them, because there are differences between producers of the aggregates, but at least in the virgin scenario, the driving factor, the most important factor, is the distance to their facility. And it concurs with the cost, as Guy mentioned, because when we also look at the transportation, the trucking cost, if you haul aggregates based on the average price of virgin aggregate in the US, if you haul it for more than 50 miles, the cost of trucking it is more than the value of the rock. So it's very, again, I can't emphasize enough that how much it's important that we work on getting policymakers and decision makers in the US to change the permitting, to support the industry being able to operate as close as possible to the market. And let's face it, depending on the political climate, you can use the sustainability and global warming in a pro-economy government. You can talk about making housing affordable, doing more in terms of building infrastructure with less money. So no matter how you look at it, the answer is you have to move closer to the market.
So I think when I met Joe, he didn't kind of led me down a path of not always using the word recycling more.
I think that's a good point. And I think Hadi was touching on, we don't want to load sites with loads of primary products wrapped up and not being used. It's so important that this whole conversation is joined up with permitting for primary aggregates sites alongside the extractive waste and, sorry, I'm going to say it again, the recycling agenda. You need to marry it up. It's not this or that. It has to be a joint approach. It's a fact that there will be more recycled product, as we've talked about. It's increasing. You were talking some numbers there, and that's great. But we need primary aggregates. We need sites extended. We need new sites. And maybe the solution is, as I talked about, CMEX, the urbanization, the closer quarries. I think that's a really good solution. I think that's a really good answer. But we need the primary product. You know, you need it alongside the recycled products or the turning waste, however you want to call it. it needs to be a joined up, a married approach. No one is saying we don't need primary product. We need primary products, and it needs to be of high quality, as does the extracted waste turning it into product. The quality is essential, and that quality will then fulfill, obviously, the regulations, the legislation, and as I say, on the money, you can charge a good price for it. You're winning on price too. And that has to be, to win hearts and minds. It's hearts, minds, and wallets and purses. People want to make money from this, and it all has to be a joined up approach. That's vital. So, that's a key point in this.
Yeah, to add to that, neither myself or Andrew are naive enough to think that recycled materials are going to replace virgin materials. The volume's just not there. But it can certainly supplement it. And it's making sure that recycled materials go to the correct application. And generally that is a lower value application. But why would you use, your hardest sort of structural concrete grade stone in basic applications? We're attacking the low hanging fruit here. That's the aim of the game. So yeah, we're not competing. It's supplementing.
And I just wanted to mention something else. Joe and I, we were invited to an event a couple of weeks ago to talk about the critical issue of sand. The world is running out of sand, and how disastrous that is. And then when I got invited to go talk at that event, I also remembered that I get called frequently from engineers at Army Corps that they have huge issue with dredge sand that they're stockpiled on the yards, and they don't know what to do with it because it doesn't meet the specification. It's right there in along the Delaware River in Philadelphia, in Maryland, at the Port of Baltimore. Maryland had to pass a legislation forcing the industry to use it, find an application for it, because they couldn't keep that material anywhere. It was expensive to move them around, and it was taking place. And when you think that that material is right there in where we need it, on the other hand, we're worried that we can't get a permit to open a new sand pit or finding a source for a sand. And then you find a solution like CDE solutions, like the plant that Andrew is working on it, and you can bring back that material to life and use it. That's a no-brainer. You have to do it.
You guys have all kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of there's also one piece that touched on we haven't touched on. Part of this, we're supplementing virgin rock. Let's put. I've always said this. The same Nehemiah, especially producing, that's perfect. We don't need that in our concrete sidewalks and stuff like that. So in that, Andrew, can take this. You're a site contractor. You got a world of where there's scarcity and sustainability. Can sustainability still be cost effective? And what do you guys do?
Yeah, from the site contracting side, a lot of what we use is not structural grade aggregate because we're using it as sub-base materials. So as long as we're getting the compaction factor, we're using it as backfill. So again, compaction. We're using it in a lot of stormwater projects. And as this conversation was going, I'm thinking about there's times where, the last 15 years, we've built a lot of underground stormwater retention, and they're filled with thousands of tons of crushed rock. And as new development comes into those projects and they have to remove those and replace them, we're better to take that, you called it primary aggregate. It's straight from the quarry. It was virgin rock that's been in the ground for 15 years, which is in the terms of rock, that's nothing. And it's been just sitting there, holding stormwater during rainwater events. And it probably has some silt on it. But if we can continue to wash, soil, mixing in primary aggregate from demolition projects like that, that's a great thing. So for me as a site contractor, there's no reason why we will not be using all these aggregates I understand concrete has structural integrity and asphalt has certain properties, not just from structural wear and things like that, and even things I'm learning about like the traction factor and things. So, maybe it's best served in the sub-base, but not the wearing surface of asphalt. But until, someone spends some time and dollars on some test cases and understanding, the production. But you can also, I'm not an asphalt producer or concrete producer, but in talking to some of them, they could sell two different types of concrete. If you're going to sell a commercial grade for sidewalks, and as long as you're using a quality spec product from the wash, recycling, that's great. If you're building a bridge deck, maybe that's where it makes sense. Yeah, exactly. And so as a commercial site contractor, it is a lot about the dollars. So if we can save the dollars by not tapping into the virgin material and let the DOTs and the skyscrapers have that material, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm not downplaying what we're doing in a way. I'm not saying that by targeting the low hanging fruit we're sort of resting on our laurels. I think there's a lot of room left for innovation and improving the quality of what we produce and getting it into higher value applications, ultimately improving our margin. And CD, credit to them, they've come on bounds with their innovation and always striving to add little tweaks to the plant to try and improve the output. And there's new frontiers for us as well. In our plants, up to 30% of what we put in the feed hopper is silt and clay, and we have an outlet for that material at the moment as a restoration material. But can we turn that material into a value-added product in the future? So, there's a lot to play with, a lot of opportunity, and innovation certainly has a big part to play in that future.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of this discussion, we would maybe touch on it a bit later as well. This is sort of the education side of it, really. It's sort of coming from sort of customers getting more familiar. Obviously, companies like CD explaining the processes and the benefits of it. Trade industry associations promoting it. There's a big education piece to this as well as the business case. And I think that's growing, and I think people are becoming more aware of it generally. And I think that's a crucial aspect to this, the education side, and it's good. And also the importance of adopters, in an area. If you have everyone's looking at each other, you're in an area, you're running quarry, so-and-so's running quarry, so-and-so's running a quarry. And, so call him Joe, runs a quarry, and suddenly they're starting to produce, new product from recycled waste. It's naive to think that the others aren't looking at this and going, that's interesting. What plant have they got? How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Word spreads. Then others think, hey, I want to have those conversations. The FOMO, that is my competitor getting one up on me from an economic, a good business sense. That's crucial, and when that sort of starts and you see it more adopted in different areas, there's a lot to be said for that. And these are things that are, we're not talking maybe on the technical side, but we're certainly talking on the reality side. If my competitor is getting an advantage and I can see it, I want a piece of that and I'm going to start investing in it. There's a lot to be said for that. So if you have a plant in an area that hasn't got those plants, but then they start doing it, and then it just spreads because people want something, extra. And if they can make money from, turning waste into new product, they'll go for it if they see a competitor is getting an advantage from that. So, the education and the FOMO side of it, they're both very, very important.
Just real quick, to Scott's point is that maybe because I haven't really produced and sold any aggregate yet, I'm more motivated to try to sell to every market. And if I was, if I had all my outlets checked off and, it was just, I don't want to use the low hanging fruit, I'd be plenty happy with that too. So maybe I'm mentally pushing for all these other, avenues as we get near opening and just making sure we have outlets for everything.
And just like that, I guess this conversation added to that, trying to recovering bulk aggregates from the base. And also, there are parts of the U.S. that, from my conversations with DOTs that we're working with, truly don't have enough reserve. Importing, let's say, Georgia or Alabama, there's because you can't just truck it. You need train capacity, you need port capacity to ship it, and they don't have that capacity to build that infrastructure to bring. We had a presentation during the convention. There's a Google Online, Florida. And it shows that how limited the aggregate source is, and they can't continue. The state that has the second largest real estate market in the U.S., can't continue its development without importing aggregates, and the numbers are significant. But when you talk to them and say, okay, you got all the coastline, why can't you bring it in? And they say, well, because our number one state income is from tourism, and the priority at the ports are given to the cruises. And for the railroad, the aggregate is sort of heavy, low profit margin material, and wherever they get the better material that they can move, the aggregate is the last thing they want to. So in those markets, or I also talked to the market, to the DOP in Alaska. They also have an issue there. Their production is declining. So there are even states in the US in that state. There's demand for recycling material, trying to use locally available sources, and we just need innovative ways.
I just got a comment just to pick up on the logistics again. I was at a major quarry in the UK. They have a huge rail aggregates business. You know, they're transporting it by rail to loads of depots. And it's interesting when you speak to them about how they go about it and how complicated it is. You know, they want, or they get certain slots where they can transport the material. But obviously the network's thinking we've got all the passenger trains, you know, we want to prioritize that. And, you know, the feedback you get from the complaints and if trains are late. But there seems to be a bit of a lack of understanding the points of industry in transporting freight. There maybe needs to be a mind shift. And I think politicians can help lead on this, that the importance of freight and transporting materials not on the road, but by rail or other ways. There needs to be a mind shift on there to put it alongside the passenger side. You know, it's so important because, you know, America doesn't get built if things aren't moving, if the logistics aren't there. No country gets built. And there needs to be an equal footing really for freight transport, whether it's aggregates or other things, alongside the passenger side. It's so important. And I think more can be done, you know, in terms of those in power and the media. People like me need to be shouting that and putting that case forward. That is so important. If we truly want to be sustainable, you know, we need to take more stuff off the road and get it on rail, get it on ships, or canals, or however you want to do it. That is so important.
Post-COVID, yes, there's been a supply chain issue, and there was shortage of truck drivers, and rails were in demand. They weren't shipping aggregate. They had high value product. And now as we are kind of getting at that critical stage that we were, the important having that infrastructure to move in again. But you can't build those infrastructure overnight. It takes huge investment to do it, and that's to kind of not being caught in that situation again. We need to think how we can reduce the transfer. We can't literally eliminate it, but using locally available material is one
just on that, it takes big money. It does in part, but it also takes will. You've got to have the mindset to want to do something, and that can go a long way. It's not just about the money, it's about we actually want to take material and do it this way. Yeah, and then that mindset shift, and you can achieve a lot without spending big bucks.
Yeah, we're actually hearing that just because of the fear that is now around Florida that they're running out of aggregates in maybe 2 decades, the state is thinking about adding capacity to their ports, maybe doing P3 projects on rails, because they know that their economic development is impossible if they can't source the aggregate. And that's really huge. That's one of the priorities for the state, how they're going to source that aggregate.
No, to your point, it takes will, and I think the motivator is economic at first. And this is my second panel in a couple of weeks that I've been on, and you meet people like Scott, and that become passionate about, as again, for me, it started over economics, but then you meet these people that are genuinely realizing and excited about the contribution to sustainability, to bring it back to that, and what it is we're doing, that really becomes more of the focus. I mean, if you take the economic part off the table for a minute and start to focus back on, what's the benefit here? And, it's great to sit up here and talk with you guys because it gets me excited about it and all the opportunity that it presents to just our local market. But then as you go, you start thinking more nationally and what the capabilities there are.
Some good stuff in there. Kind of, I want to lean into some global sites. So, start with you, Guy. How does sustainability trends in the aggregates differs across the region? Also, what improvements and changes do you notice in today versus 5 years ago? But then also, what's 5 years ago? Also go forward. Where's the market going to go in 10 years? What's to stop? Bringing aggregate down from Canada? Are we going to focus on the last of Cleveland where, you guys?
Well, we've gone over obviously a lot on this, but when you've got, major countries, I mentioned at the start, China and India, and having gone to these countries and seen what they're doing, and you go before, you come with a preconception, you think, are these markets advanced? What are they doing? Is sustainability really on the agenda? But it very much is, as we talked about before, they're doing so much. I went to a super quarry in sort of central China. I was at a China Aggregates Association international conference, and someone mentioned a super quarry. And this is the beauty of China. You say, hey, someone mentioned a super quarry. Can I go and see it? And then the next day they'd organized transport, they'd organized a translator. You're going there in a Mercedes truck. This is incredible. Obviously they've laid this on, they're putting the, best face forward. So then, we drive, I think it was about 4 hours each way. It was a long way, but you get there and it's remarkable what's being done. They've got all the employees living on site. They've got all the sort of waste material. An incredible thing is they, all the cake they created, so they're washing, and they're using it, and they're creating like ceramics. They're creating like artworks off their waste product. I mean, how much greener can you get? Greta would be there and hugging them all, Greta Thunberg. It's incredible what could be done. This comes to the will, this is the will again. If the market says, we should go this way, and they're encouraging business to do it, and business embraces it so fully, it's amazing what can be done, and on the machines, they've got all the haul trucks they're using and the kinetic energy. They have the site set up where it's going up. It's not actually using any energy on the down from the quarry. So they're using the kinetic energy. Fuel costs are really low. Pretty much every plant on this site is electric. I mean, this is phenomenal. What can be done? So that really opened my eyes. And then I've seen very advanced processes in India. I've been to South Korea and seen some super quarries there where they're doing a lot on sustainability, but also the digital side. I touched on how that was with sustainability, a key to digitalization with sustainability. And a massive quarry operator, and he's sitting there, he's got his staff, and it's like a Tracy Island, he's got these screens everywhere. It's remarkable. And he's doing it on the digital side, but also marrying the telematics into the sustainability. could a lot more on the monitoring on the sustainability be done on site? So you're producing all these materials. Can you monitor it through the telematics? Is that a way you're marrying the digital side with the sustainable side? I think a lot more can be done there on the telematics to actually monitor production and what you're doing and analyzing on that side. So it's remarkable. When those huge markets are doing it, it does, again, you think, well, it's already happening in Europe. It's happening more in America. And then if China's on board and then India's on board, you think, I think something's happening here. And this is really the last few years. You know, you're saying, how does it differ from 5 years ago? Absolutely, it's a different market. It's a different ball game. You know, it is a completely different ball game now. And that's not going to change. And if there's the business case, the money case with the quality and the sustainability case, you marry it together, it's the way it is now, and it's only going to grow. Because if the likes of China and India are doing it, the two biggest aggregates markets in the world, well, others follow.
So I also wanted to add that right before 2 days ago here in St. Louis during the NSSGA convention, we had the engineering and technical committee meeting, and we had 3 speakers, external speakers, talking from members. When I think about it, all 3 of them were successful. Our first speaker was his talk was using quarry finds or that are not suitable, doesn't meet the specification, just the good rocks. It's just too fine that there's not that much demand for it in construction. It usually sits on a quarry and wind up being a problem because you can't access the reserve. It takes real estate, and you at some point you have to put it back in a landfill. And they're using it for something that some of you may know, enhanced rock weathering, for absorbing CO2, removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And it's in the U.S. market, there's about $200 million market for it right now, the credit that has been sold. And they're now looking to find the rocks for it. And in order to do it, they have to, if they actually go and want to start from with the right rock, they have to crush it and grind it to a very fine size so that its surface area is high and it can absorb CO2 very fast. Now, we have a material that's so fine that it's not good for construction. And it's ready for them to use it. It may not be the perfect size for them, but at least it's 80-90% there. So we're now thinking, okay, this could be used for that, and let's use it, make a positive use out of it. The second presentation was about extracting essential minerals, critical minerals from quarry overburdens. There was a case study that was presented that in terms of specification and quality requirement, we always stay away from shale. Shale is bad as physical properties, bad. It's not good for construction. But they found in that specific case, they found critical minerals in that shale overburden layers that there was millions of tons of it in a quarry that was 40, 50 years old, and over the time, as they moved around, there were stockpiles built up, and some of it were placed back into the pit. And now they were actually going to extract that material out of the pit for extracting critical mineral from it. And the last presentation, of course, was about the Florida situation, but that why we're moving the rocks from Nova Scotia to Florida is just because of the lack of the infrastructure. And one of the other projects that we have started working with researchers is on 3D printing. We know there's a lot of innovation happening in the 3D printing concrete for future for construction. And you look at the material that comes out of the concrete 3D printer extruder. It's a very fine. It's more like a paste than the traditional ready-mix concrete. And for that material, they actually
going to specialty product producers to make that for them. And some of them are importing it from overseas. Actually, going back to that enhanced rock feathering, the presenter was talking about that they're importing the dust rock from Norway because there's no manufacturer in the U.S. But on the and then for 3D printing the ink, many of them are importing it from overseas because there aren't that many suppliers in the U.S. And we asked them, why don't you look at the pond fines that are settling in the in the ponds at the quarries after washing the material. Those are really fine. We have no application. Why don't you look at the screenings that are fine and it's not economical for producer to go through it and do further processing. And at least with pond fines, so far, they've been very successful. So we are also looking into all of that and see how we can minimize the waste from the operations, and not only for the virgin aggregates, but even on the recycling side. On recycling concrete, you can also carbonate concrete. Concrete carbonation is one of the reasons that concrete gets harder over the time. But think about this building, the exterior walls made of concrete, they're exposed to CO2, but all the concrete inside the building, it's not getting any exposure to CO2. And when you recycle it, you crush it. All that faces of the concrete aggregate that were previously inside the structural element and had no chance of exposure to CO2, they are ready to absorb that CO2. And the finer they are, the higher, the faster they can get carbonated. So we're encouraging our members who are doing concrete recycling to start looking into carbon market and see how they can sell that product for sequestering carbon. So there are a lot that our industry can do, and we are trying to inform our members. We're trying to stay engaged, and as the technology becomes available, and it all also makes sense because there's a market for it. There's money out there. We just have to inform the industry how they can take advantage of it and have a profit.
Just wanted to add on the recycled concrete. It's definitely a growing trend. You know, when I'm getting approached by a lot of major OEMs and smaller OEMs, and they want to talk to me about it. You know, I've had direct approaches. Hey, when are you going to write more about recycled concrete? We've got an offer here. You know, it sort of informs you that the market's shifting because they want to talk to me about it because their customers are talking about it. And that's crucial. When you start to see that, and, you know, I wasn't getting those emails. I wasn't getting those phone calls about it. Now I am. That tells me a lot that the market's shifting. And I just thought, you know, that's from a global perspective, not just a US. That's very, very true.
Yeah, I think just coming back to the question, Joe, I guess the last 5 years, the biggest difference I've seen is customer confidence and how that's grown. But it's surprising how fragile that confidence can be from market to market. So we were perhaps a little naive when we developed our second plant that we're dealing with the same customers with different sites in a different area of Scotland. This will be easy. You know, we've established the market in the east. We'll go over to the west and we'll do the same thing over there. But actually, it's been a harder sell than we anticipated. And it comes down to the individual user. You know, they have to have, you know, the guys on the site have to have confidence in the material. And that feeds back up through the buyer and ultimately the decision makers. So customer confidence is a big, you know, it's something that's improved over the last 5 years, but it's a continual effort to educate the market ultimately. Opportunity for the future. I think, as I mentioned, quality, you know, keep striving for improved quality and getting into higher value applications, and improving margins ultimately. Becoming 100% circular. So as I mentioned, the silk clay material, finding a value added product for that, composting the organics that come off the plant, And I visited Miguel Lambert, who's in the crowd today, visited his plant on Monday, and they're already doing that. So I'm certainly not in the States to come here and sort of preach to you how to do things. Not at all. I'm here to learn as much as anything. And I've already done that this week. And then, Hadi was touching on it. Things like carbonation, carbon credit markets, secondary aggregates, these fines that have been left behind in quarries, not only natural material, but also incinerator bottom ash, which is becoming a big thing it's been a big thing in mainland Europe for a long time, Guy, but it's becoming a bigger thing as incinerators come online in the UK. I know there's not so many of them in the States, but landfills are being forced to close in the UK, so all refuse waste is going to incinerators, and you have to deal with the ash that comes out of that. So that's a big opportunity too.
Name check a company, Recyclate in Aberdeen. They're doing a lot on the incinerator bottom ash, and they're very active. I've interviewed their CEO. They're really proactive. They've got a great sort of marketing team. They're real advocates, on this area, and it's another great sustainability story, recycling story. And I sort of joke with them as saying, are you fearful of being bought up by a major? And with a lot of these things, that's probably, they've got one eye on that, because that is the way the market's shifting. And that's another really good example, about how a waste product's being turned into a product used in mixes. They've got a tie-in with Breeden, which is very, very big and growing. And that's a really another interesting success story, a growing success story on incinerators, bottom ash.
And to your point, other feed materials. We haven't even started, and we're getting approached by the dredgings that you mentioned in Philadelphia, and how they could classify that sand and aggregate. So I think we're going to see other opportunities in other feed material outside of soil.
Well, gentlemen, I just want to say thank you for a great panel. I think it's a great discussion for everybody in the crowd. Just kind of just wrap this up before we take some Q&A. Does anybody have any final thoughts, or, open up to the floor and take some questions? Oh, it's not on.
I guess from my point, the next 4 years, the new federal administration, sustainability is going to have some challenges. There are many states, mainly blue states, that already have legislation. And it's funny, I was at the meeting in Illinois in early January, and between the election and before the inauguration, they were working on a set of legislations, and they were calling that set of legislation Trump-proofing the state of Illinois. And other states did it as well. So in some of those states, you will see still the support from the state government through legislations, through policies. So it might be easier in those states. On the federal level, we're probably not going to see that, at least not increasing incentives. Seems like so right now they're even freezing up and trying to take away the incentives that was authorized in the Inflation Reduction Act. However, as we all discussed, a lot of sustainability discussions are in the need and the demand for it, market-driven. It just makes sense. That's the right thing to do. And I think you may see, based on the priorities of the new administration, maybe some rebranding in some areas, calling it maybe something else in the name of optimization, efficiency. This is the era of DOGE, government efficiency. So you may see some rebranding, but I'm confident that all the work and initiatives towards sustainability in the industry are going to move forward. we may see a less incentive with, for example, for EPDs as part of the IRA. Many of trade associations, there was a program in the IRA for EPD assistance. It authorized $250 million federal government spending to give rebates to the industry to get free EPDs and publish their data. We just heard at least 21 of the 37 grants that were going to get awarded by the EPA got canceled by EPA. So a lot of that money that was supposed to be given to the industry to publish their data is not going to be there anymore. So that's going to be challenging, but I'm confident that the most of the initiatives on the industry side will move forward.
I just want to thank you guys. I think I'm always learning every day about this, and it's exciting. And, you kind of hit on something that I had said all along this way, and trying to develop this it makes sense. When you just sit down and you think about what it is, it does, to take these things and make something usable out of it. It makes you scratch your head and think, well, why aren't we doing that? And I think I was quoted in an article when we closed our deal on our financing, and I said something like, I always say to my partner, if someone's going to build one of these, it might as well be us. And I kind of thought that was made me sound kind of foolish a little bit, but honestly, that's really what it is with innovation, right? If we don't get out ahead of it and do this and have these discussions and push these things forward, well, someone else will get there. So I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, I certainly feel that excitement from you, Andrew. And if anything, I'm a bit jealous because, that bell curve of market life cycle, you're at that point in the curve where in my view, you're at that point in the curve where things really take off. And in the UK, perhaps, we're already gone through that and things are sort of flattening out slightly. So it's a really exciting time for you. And, looking forward to see how things progress.
Just to take up the point about Doge that was mentioned, what could be more efficient than turning waste into dollars? Really, if you're going to look at it like that, that's pretty efficient. So Elon, let's, bring this on. But in a serious sort of point, again, it's, who takes the lead. And, if governments are taking the lead and helping industry on this, the likes of New Zealand, they're the first government they've created, the minerals was always essential, but no one's actually ranked it as critical to a country, critical to a country's functioning. Well, New Zealand have just published a critical minerals list, and aggregates and sand is right in there. Now, that's fantastic. It'd be great if more governments followed their example, and it really just sort of pushes the importance of, producing these materials. And obviously the sustainability agenda goes cap in hand with that. So New Zealand, we should credit them, and hopefully others will follow. I know from talking to Aggregates Europe, UEPG, the European Aggregates Association, they were delighted with what's happened in New Zealand. And they're pushing hard within Brussels, within the EU for something similar. And I think that's really great. If you've got the policy makers, the key decision makers, the governments hammering home the sustainability agenda, hammering home on the extractive waste, turning it into products, that goes a long way. That will really help.
Thank you very much. We like to make the world better one ton at a time. So we've been doing this for 20 plus years. So we're in the forefront of this for quite some time. And we really look forward to the next 20 years after this. So thank you everybody from the crowd, and any questions, please raise your hand and we'll try to listen.
Just in my understanding of the landfill pricing in our market, that is taking in contaminated soil. The market condition and the price is really what's the driving force behind, the inbound is the number one thing that creates the outbound. So when we went down this path with CD and started, I had already had experience in contaminated soil disposal, and that is all driven by landfill pricing. So with the decrease of landfills and not too many new ones coming online in our market, that space is valuable. And so they keep increasing their price. So do we put trash in there, or do we put soil in there? Granted, they need some soil for day cover. I don't think it's particularly government tariff that's driving it. It's just that market demand. We create more waste every day from our own households, and as that gets pushed into the landfill, it needs to push other materials elsewhere. And so we become an outlet for that soil that's currently going in there.
One of the things, so I work for the trade association, yeah, and one of the bylaws that we have is that we don't discuss business secrets and how vendors do things. So sometimes, like if somebody figure out how they can make a new money in a new way, not everybody is open to talk about it because then their competition is going to figure out and they're going to do the same. I've heard stories, specifically, with the, carbonation of recycled concrete aggregates, that, some of our members are doing that and, they are measuring how much CO2 they're observing and they're having that verified and sell. Now, how much they're doing it, how exactly they're doing it. There was only one case that we had one of the members came and talked about how they're doing it, which was pretty basic. The way they thought it makes sense. They had the stockpile of recycled concrete aggregates and they figure out by doing try and error, spreading it out, sprinkling water all over it, rotating it with the wheel loader, and taking samples every day and taking it to the lab and measure how much it changed the different carbonation, and then multiply that by the size of the stockpile. And they also mentioned that they figure out it makes sense to keep it on site, not selling it for nearly 2 months or 8 weeks, and keep rotating it. And at about 8 weeks is where it starts plateauing, and it makes sense to sell it and start working at the new stockpiles. So yes, there are some that are doing it, but I'm not sure if I know enough at that, how many are doing it, to what level, how much credit they're creating and selling, and what price they're selling it. That information, unfortunately, I don't have. But there is one of the other ways of doing it is the enhanced weathering that I mentioned. And there's a website called CDR.FYI. That if you go to that website, it shows all the different ways of carbon removal, like the market for each of them, and you can filter for enhanced weathering, and it will show the market for enhanced weathering and all the companies that are in that space. I'm not sure if I answered your question, if that was what you were looking for.
You know, we came across something interesting, and I think with the new administration, it's not going to come back around, but there was ways to get significant reimbursement on our capital costs, and because we're a carbon crediting process and recycling process. So there was a program that was, reimbursing those construction costs at a percentage of the total value. And last I spoke to them, the program had closed and they were going through the round of approvals. And then if there was money left over, they may reopen it. So we're kind of, waiting to see what happens with that. But I don't really see that as a current option.